He didn't travel with us. He just traveled with me 2 weeks out of each month on my speaking engagements. But on this particular day that God was prepared to begin giving us the answer to anger, we had to drive down to Little Rock. I don't even remember what for at this point. And when I came out of the bedroom after getting ready to go, there was Daniel, Matthew in his arms, his harness and leash on, all ready to go. And I was absolutely delighted. And I said, "Oh, Matthew's going with us. How did Matthew emotionally manipulate you into taking him along?" And Daniel said, "None of your business." But anyway, everybody was happy. I was happy, Matthew was happy, Daniel was happy, and we all climbed in his pickup truck for the trip down to Little Rock, which takes a little more than 2 hours to get there because it's 125 miles. All right, so we started out, and the first half of the trip is in the narrow, curvy, 2-lane, mountainous roads. Matthew very quickly purred himself to sleep in my lap, and we were traveling along. Now you know, and I've been experiencing it since I've been here and on every trip I go on, there are basically 2 different kinds of drivers here in the United States, right? There's the slow drivers. In the passing lane, this is my road. I'm going to drive 15 miles an hour under the speed limit if I want to, and you don't need to go any faster than I want to go. Some of you are those slow drivers, huh? And then there are the fast drivers. Hurry up, get out of my way. I've got places to go and things to do. Now, my husband is a 1-star general in the United States Air Force. For 30 years, he has been a jet fighter pilot, and I have to tell you that the word slow is not in Daniel's vocabulary. He does not know the meaning of the word slow. And he takes all of our vehicles and he soups them up, which is fine with me, and so that they will go very, very fast. So it wasn't long, and we came up behind one of these slow drivers. But the problem was, we were still on the narrow, curvy mountain roads, and Daniel couldn't pass him. And it was one of those drivers that the closer that Daniel came to his bumper, the more he would put on the brakes and slow down. You've all experienced this at some time or another, I'm sure. It is a source of great frustration, especially when you're someone that has to commute into a downtown large city and cope with rush hour traffic. You ever notice there's a lot of drivers that leave about 10 car lengths between them and the car in front of them? Yeah, that's one of the reasons why rush hour traffic gets so piled up. But anyway, finally, we reached a point in the road where Daniel could pass. And as he pulled out to go around this driver, the driver slammed his foot down on his accelerator and sped up as fast as he could go to try and keep Daniel from getting around him. He didn't stand a chance. He didn't know what was underneath the hood of Daniel's pickup truck. So Daniel zipped on around him, and obviously the driver was furious. And he started honking his horn, and I know he was yelling at us, although we couldn't hear him, and he was shaking his fist at us, and he was giving us the universal driver's bad attitude hand signal. But we zipped on around him, and went on around the curve, and went on our way. Immediately, Matthew woke up, and he began to pace and cry. And pace and cry. Now, Matthew never behaves like this in the car, ever, because he loves to ride. And immediately, Daniel was furious. And he turned to me, and our conversation went like this. Daniel said, "Rebecca, what's wrong with that cat?" And I said, "I don't know. I didn't pinch him. Matthew never behaves like this in the car." "Well, throw him out the window. Over my dead body, I'll throw you out the window first." And our conversation went downhill from that point. Now, when it comes to throwing my Matthew out the window, that's serious business. And Daniel and I sinned in our anger. I know that every one of you have been engaged in similar conversations. Yes, you have. Yes. Well, Matthew cried all the way to Little Rock, the whole time we were in Little Rock, and all the way back. That cat meowed nonstop for 8 hours. And when we finally got home and were pulling back into our driveway, I was carefully explaining to Matthew that he better be glad he had a mama who truly loved him, or I would have thrown him that day. So we went into the house. I was utterly exhausted. I threw supper on the table, which I freely admit was a bit of a burnt offering. And then I fell into bed. Now, those of you that were here on one of the nights I was teaching about cleansing your home, you remember that I taught that one of the symptoms of having a demon spirit in your house is terrible, tormented nightmares. Well, I fell asleep, and it wasn't long, and I had a terrible, tormented nightmare. And I finally managed to wake up out of it, and I knew that there was a demon in our house. Now, you need to understand, the one thing I do not tolerate is a demon in our home. And I am absolutely meticulous about keeping our home anointed and cleansed and sealed. That's just one of the things that I just always do. And I woke up enough and I thought, how did this demon get in here? But I was so exhausted, I just couldn't drag myself out of bed to do anything about it. So I fell back asleep. Wasn't long, Daniel came to bed. And he went to sleep. And it wasn't long after that, Daniel had a terrible nightmare. Now, Daniel does not have nightmares quietly. He yells at the top of his voice, absolutely scares me out of my skin and right out of the bed. And I went around and I was shaking him. I was saying, wake up, you're having a nightmare. And finally he groggily began to come to. And I said, Daniel, there's a demon in our house. How did this demon get in our house? And he was so tired, he said, well, just kick him out. And I said, no, I'm not going to kick him out until I know how he got in. Well, maybe you brought him in. That was not the thing to say at that point. So I drugged my poor husband out of bed and I said, come on, we have to pray. We have to find out why this demon is in our home. So Daniel finally, with great reluctance, climbed out of the bed, and we went into the living room and we began to pray. And suddenly Daniel opened his eyes. He said, Rebecca, stop praying. He said, I know how the demon got in. I said, you do? He said, yeah. He said, do you remember that slow driver in the beginning of the trip? And I said, yeah, I remember. He said, do you remember the bumper sticker on the back of his car? No, you were driving so close I couldn't see the bumper. Well, he said there was a pentagram on it. The guy was into witchcraft. And he was so angry that Daniel passed him that his anger was a curse. Now remember I told you that animals see in the spirit realm? And so when the anger demons from that curse arrived in our pickup truck, immediately they woke up Matthew. And he was trying to tell us that something was terribly wrong, but we were too stupid to pay any attention to him. Because by that time, Daniel was furious, and then, of course, I was furious, and then we were busily engaged in our period of intense fellowship. Yeah, and we sinned in our anger, okay? And that sin gave those demon spirits the legal right to cling to us. And so when we got home, they rode into our house right on our backs. So we prayed and we confessed and we asked God to forgive us. We anointed one another, broke the curses off of us. I anointed Matthew, who was still pacing, by the way. He had never gone to sleep. And then we commanded all the curses to be broken, and we kicked all the demons out of the house, and we resealed our house, and instantly we had peace. And Matthew collapsed and went to sleep. Poor little guy slept the whole day the next day. He was utterly worn out from meowing for 8 hours in a row. All right, that was the first step in the lesson.